Okay, my name is Champ Zumbrun. I come from Western Maryland. I worked for 31 years at Green Ridge State Forest. Anybody know that place? Green Ridge, okay. It's the largest contiguous block of forest land in Western Maryland. It's 50,000 acres, but I imagine you got larger forests here like Monongahela, right? That's a national forest. I'm a forester by profession. I've written a lot of things, but tonight I'm talking about Cresap's Rifles. How many have heard of Thomas Cresap? Okay.
Cresap Rolls.
Cresap Rolls, okay. Wow. Okay. And so the Cresaps pretty much first settled in Western Maryland in the 1740s. They're considered the first settlers of Western Maryland. They settled in Old Town, Maryland in 1742. And how many have been to Old Town? It's a bustling town. Okay. Okay, great. It's right along the Potomac River. And so that's the focus of my talk. It's about the Cresaps and their influence during the American Revolution. I wrote this book. I co-wrote this book, actually. Anybody know Bob Vance? He's pretty well known. He was a co-author of this book, along with Nina Cresap and Karen Cresap, who is a direct descendant of Michael Cresap, who I'm focusing on. A lot of the history of the Cresaps occurred on a state forest where I work. That's why I'm mentioning Green Ridge. And so we're going to talk about 1775. Anything happened of significance in 1775?
Well, there was a little.
I think there's a little skirmish of some type, right? Yes, the American Revolution. A lot of talk is being made about 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, 250th anniversary. And so when we wrote this book, it came out in 2018. We didn't even think about that. But now we're hearing from the Sons of American Revolution all over the country, and they say this book's going to get on the Henry Knox bookshelf. Anybody ever heard that? It's supposed to be gets a book national exposure to the Sons of the American Revolution folks, and it's not up there yet, so don't look, but they said it's going to go up soon. And so I will promote this book nationally. But we had no intention. We just love this character called Michael Cresap and the Cresaps, and that's why we wrote the book. But just so happened, we wrote it at the right time, apparently, because we're getting invited to speak a lot of places. But anyway, so Cresap's Rifles. This is a minor figure in history because I just saw only a couple of hands go up, right? So not really many. I know many of you have heard of George Washington. Well, guess what? These folks were personal friends with George Washington. When George Washington would come to Western Maryland, he would stay with the Cresaps, often along with many other folks. And so we decided to write this book. George Washington, during the French and Indian War, spent a lot of time at Fort Cumberland. And during the French and Indian War, he saw the expert riflemanship of these men with the long rifles. These rifle barrels that they could shoot, some say accurately, to 300 yards. They were expert sharpshooters. And Washington was really impressed with these folks that handled the long rifles. And Cresaps were masters of a long rifle. So when the American Revolution broke out, Congress asked George if he could, should I use the microphone, by the way? Maybe? Yeah. Yeah, try. Go ahead. Check. Okay. Continental Congress had formed and asked George Washington to take command of the Continental Forces up in Boston. George would not do it unless he could get some rifle companies. And one of the first companies said, I will not accept leading these folks unless I can get 10 rifle companies, 2 of them from Maryland, 2 of them from Virginia, and 6 from Pennsylvania. I want Michael Cresap and Tom Price from Maryland, and I want Daniel Morgan. Anybody ever heard of Daniel Morgan? I figured. Daniel Morgan from from Virginia to lead a rifle company up, along with another. So anyway, he wanted 10 rifle companies, and Continental Congress said, well, and that we can fund 80 folks in each company. And so on June 14th, 1775, which the U.S. Army celebrates as their birthday, was the selection of 10 rifle companies. Michael Cresap's company was the first rifle company. You'll see that. It was known as the first rifle company. And so, but we knew very little about Michael Cresap, and so we knew at the time of the breaking of the American Revolution, we thought he was in, so when I'm talking about our co-authors here, thought he was in Western Maryland when Lexington broke out, and he was just going to take a hike from Frederick, Maryland to Boston. To Boston. And, well, how did he get there? There's no buses or airplanes, right? To drive him out there, and he needed to get out there quick. It was still August, was late July, and he's still in Western Maryland. So one of the challenges we decided when we wrote this book was, let's figure out how they hiked how they marched to Boston. What route did they take? It was a mystery, and we checked all kind of books, and we never saw anybody note the route. And so we'll try to figure that out. And so, and then when the rifle company arrived, he did arrive in Boston. Did they contribute anything? I'm going to give you a spoiler right now, okay? Hang on to your seats. Michael unfortunately passed away in October 18th, 1775. So basically that's all it's known. He made it to Boston and he died October 18th. And so did he do anything in Boston to help George Washington out? So that was a challenge. That's what we're going to decide. We didn't know nothing when we wrote this book. So we decided to take a leap. And guess what? A net appeared. I didn't invent that saying. John Burroughs said, when you want to take a leap of faith, take a leap and a net will appear. And when we wrote this book, we were getting all kinds of documents coming forward that confirmed what I'm about to share with you right now. So in this story about the riflemen, we're going to get a glimpse of the backbone, grit, and character of the men and women, little known to history, who helped build our nation. And I'm going to be bold enough to say that without these 10 rifle companies, there could have been a very different turnout of the American Revolutionary War. So I'll tell you about that. Hang on to your seats. Okay, here we go. Well, first of all, we're going to move on to this. I do have other slides, folks. This right here, photo, let me see here. Is this working? Let me see. Where's my, not getting any, let's see. For some reason my laser's not working. No, let's see, this will, oh, here we go. I didn't have it on. Okay, right there. Okay, this picture is taken at Old Town in Michael Cresap's house in Old Town, Maryland. It's the oldest standing structure. Excuse me? Oh, this is taken at Michael Cresap's house in Old Town, Maryland. Cresap's house in Old Town, Maryland is the oldest standing structure in Allegheny County. It was built in 1764, the year Michael Cresap got married. And he built this home, and this is in one of the rooms of Cresap's home. It is now owned by the Maryland Historical Trust in partnership with another person, but this photograph is taken there, and that's Bob Bance's outfit there that we set up there, and so that's the cover of our book. That's where it's taken, the oldest standing structure, Michael Cresap's house. And that is the long rifle, right there. That's what we're talking about, right here. I'll tell you more about it. So that's the house from a distance in Old Town. Some of you have probably seen it. And so what happened here when the rifle company agreed to, when Cresap agreed to march to Boston in 1775, Actually, when the Battle of Lexington took place, he wasn't in Western Maryland. Michael Cresap was in Kentucky. I'm going to show you a map. He didn't start his march from the official marching place, was supposed to be Frederick, Maryland. He started it in Kentucky. And so I will venture to say, you won't find this in history books, but I will say he walked the first of any riflemen in 1775 to join George Washington. I'll show you the map here in a second. And to get to the official march, though, starts in Frederick, Maryland. They started August 1st and got to Boston August 26th. To do that, they hiked about 25 miles a day. He was leading, he was only allowed to have 80 men in his company, but 130 men joined him. They were so enthusiastic to join Cresap that they just volunteered and said, hey, let us march with you. We're going to go with you to Boston, and we're going to challenge those redcoats. I was going to say something else, but anyway. So these men turned out to be George Washington's Continental shock troops. They put the fear of God in the British. In fact, they were so scared of the British that they refused to leave Boston. They wouldn't confront Washington's army when they were least organized. Washington was just organizing his army, and they would not fight him because they knew the long rifles were in the area. So this is the world back in 1775, the way Cresap would have known it, the way Daniel Morgan would have known it. The world of Cresap. There were only 13 colonies. We were under British rule. There were only 2.5 million people at this time in the colonies of European American descent, and now there's about 300 plus odd million people. The big concern at the time, the big political issue at the time was Britain. We were under British rule. Was putting the thumb down on the colonies and taxing them without representation. They were upset with their taxes. How about that? But they felt like they had no representation, and they didn't want to be treated like the British treated the Irish. It was well known that the British were treated Ireland terrible, and they were concerned that that's how they were going to be taken care of it if they let the British dominate them in the upcoming years. 85 to 90% of the forest was in forest cover. What you're seeing there, there's an American chestnut. I thought these were the American chestnut, but as I look at the bark closer, this is the American chestnut, and these are yellow poplar. And these are old growth forests of old. These are some of the critters that were running around during Cresap's time and during Morgan's time. Mountain lions, passenger pigeons, elks, Carolina parakeet. It was a nature wonderland back then. But I guess they couldn't sit around like we do, bird watchers, and just enjoy the birds and everything. They're just trying to survive out there. And so now I'm moving into the time Michael first sees action in a skirmish this is 1756. How many have heard of the Negro Mountain controversial issue? Okay. Well, the Cresaps were involved in that. It involved Cresap's militia. And we know for a fact that the Negro that was serving with Cresap was a free Negro. It was, that's how the 1775 papers said it. When he fought boldly during an encounter with the Indians, he saved Cresap's life. And as a result, that's one of the oldest place names in Maryland. 1756 is one of the oldest place names. And guess what? I didn't get the slide for you. They just put the sign back up. It is now Negro Mountain with the signs up. And so, because it was thoroughly researched and it was proven, some of the arguments were proven that this indeed was named for this Negro. And so make a long story short, guess who's in that militia at 13 years old? Michael Cresap. He's seeing experiences encountering Indians at 13 years old. How old are you?
16.
Okay, so 3 years earlier, he's fighting Indians already.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I already said this, but Kentucky has Boone, Tennessee, Davy Crockett. Maryland has the Cresaps. Maryland Cresap's first military experience on Negro Mountain, and would participate. He would, in his lifetime, as I said, he died in 1775. In his short lifetime, he lived to be 33 years old, 1742, 1775, and he saw 4 colonial battles, 4 colonial wars, basically. French and Indian War, Lord Dunmore's War, Pontiac's War, and the American Revolutionary War in his short lifetime. This is a painting by Lee Teeter of the Negro Mountain incident. Lee Teeter was most famous for painting that Vietnam Wall picture. He was a big fan of Thomas Cresap. There's an artist's depiction of Michael Cresap. He is the first European American born in the Upper Potomac River Valley that we know of on record. I'm sure there may have been others born, but on a record we know he was born in 1742. And I already mentioned the oldest existing house. He grew up among Native Americans, and so he's highly influenced by the Native Americans. And his style of fighting was Native American style, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. And George Washington often stayed with the Cresaps. Not at this place. There's another place up on top of the hill called Cresap's Fort. It's no longer standing. Just that's where Washington would stay when he came into Old Town. And here's an artist's depiction of Daniel Morgan's company, the Virginia 2 rifle companies that marched to Boston. They were known to have the insignia "Liberty or Death" on their shirts written in. There was no standard uniform at the time because the Army's just forming. This is the founding of the United States Army. Remember, June 14, 1775, which the Army still celebrates to this day, their birthday. There was no standard uniform, so they identified their ranks with sashes or feathers in their caps. And that's how they denoted rank among their militia. And the British thought this was a joke, actually. They made fun of their outfits, and that's how the song Yankee Doodle Dandy. Yankee Doodle Dandy is actually a British attempt to say derogatory comments about the colonial army at the time. There were 6 Pennsylvania rifle companies, as I said. Their dress was buckskin primarily, not as colorful. But then there was 2 Maryland companies in Maryland. Cresap Rifles probably was the most famous rifle company. The press covered him on his march up to Boston, which helped us determine where the route was. And Michael Cresap probably was best known of all the riflemen because of the enduring press accounts while on march that were printed throughout the colonies. And so I say, fashion does matter. If you're more colorful, he also did, with his companies, incredible shooting skills demonstrated on each town. When he came to a town, after marching 26 miles at night, he would do a shooting demonstration in a town. Would you like me to read an account of one of the shooting demonstrations? I think I have a page number here somewhere. Well, I will read it eventually if you want me to. But anyway, let's move on.
Excuse me, why was this face painted?
Well, put the fear of God in the British, plus that was how Native Americans dressed when they went to battle. And he was highly influenced by the Native Americans. And so their men dressed like Indians. In fact, they were often mixed up with the Native Americans, and sometimes men confused them for Indians and endangered them. Michael Cresap made a 1,000-mile journey to Kentucky in 1775. He started down here as surveying property after Lord Dunmore's War, and they secured Kentucky for the colonies. And so right away, Michael's down here in the spring of 1775, marking out boundaries and property for himself and his family. Well, anyway, Lexington occurs in April up here. But Michael didn't know anything about it because there's no news, right? There's no radio or anything like that, TV, to keep up the current events. He was just feeling sick. He was not well. After 1774, he was not right after he also fought in the Lord Dunmore's War, which is a whole other story, but it was a fight against the Indians to try to secure Ohio country and Kentucky country. And there's a long story about that, but he's down here during when Lexington occurs. He works his way back home. He said he left his surveying crew down here, but he said he's going to return home, try to recover his health. And on his way home, right around Redstone, a messenger met him and said, "Hey, George Washington wants you to join him in Boston. Bring a company up to Boston, and he wants you there as soon as possible." Well, Cresap was sick at the time, and he didn't want to go. And so he first turned it down. He said, "I'm not going to go to Boston, I'm sick." And he said, "Well, here's a message from your father." His father at this time was in his late 70s. He says, "If you don't go and organize a company, he's marching and taking them." And so Michael said, "Okay, I can't let that happen." So he does, he agrees to take a company up to Boston. And so he starts or formally organizes his company in Fredericktown, Maryland, and begins August 1st. And so basically he's going through Kentucky, through what is today West Virginia, but in Maryland, of course, and then in Frederick, he starts in Maryland and walks through with a company of 180 men up through Fredericktown, Taneytown, in York, Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Reading. He's going through all these towns, and up through New Jersey, Connecticut. He's covering about 26 miles a day. Anybody walked 4 miles recently? 26 miles a day. I just did a 4-mile hike the other day, and I couldn't, but someone told me you have to walk 21 more miles, and oh man, I know I wouldn't be able to do it. But these folks were in great shape back then. And so anyway, ended up in Boston. Started August 1st here. August 25th, he's in Boston with 130 men.
Excuse me, how did you ascertain that was the route?
Oh, excellent question. Well, remember, I told you Michael got a lot of press. The local papers were covering that, and they were covering other rifle companies. So this was the fun part of my research project. I went on the road and went to each individual town, talked to librarians, historians. Also, George Washington kept a fabulous diary. And usually any trail that George Washington went on, and he would document it in his journals, was a high chance that that was the road, common road at the time. And then I would confirm it with about 2 other sources. And so that's how we established it. It's also amazing, newspaper.com, there's all kind of articles from 1775 in the newspapers. You can read it. All you need is to pay about $130 subscription, and you can do a search, and that's how I found a lot of the information. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So part of the journey when he left Old Town, Maryland, this is part of Greenwich State Forest. Anybody ever seen this view before? The road went by here, so Cresap would have seen this. This was taken by Steve Dean. The road connecting Fort Cumberland to Fort Frederick in 1756, connected with this. This is known as George Washington's Curve. George Washington, after the American Revolution, came back. He wanted to put a canal on the Virginia side. This is now West Virginia. But in George's time, this was Virginia. And he was trying to get a canal coming up the Virginia side to go out to the Ohio Valley. And, well, this is Point Lookout at Green Ridge, and the canal is on the Maryland side today. It's a C&O canal. And so this is a view that Cresap's rifles would have seen on their way to Boston. When it came to town, they would stop at when it came to these towns, each day they would stop at the local tavern. That was a social information center where it was the heart and soul of the community. That's where things were happening. Where would we go today to, if everybody, I think we'd come here, right? In this very room to find out what's happening in the community. And basically, when he went to the tavern, he would check in, talk to the tavern owner. Tavern owners were usually the community leaders, politicians, deacons, or all three, militia leaders, or all three. So that's how they get their news in each town. I'm sure he was asking any news on Boston or any news breaking, what's going on. These are the key dates. I'm not going to belabor these things, but August 26th. These are important dates, but I don't want to. I'll be here all night talking about this, so I better stay on point. August 26th is a key date I want you to think about. This is the only contemporary sketch we have. Contemporary meaning was drawn during the time of 1777 in this case, but this is of the riflemen, and that's the only known contemporary sketch we have of a rifleman in action. They could shoot live rounds at targets supported at 250 yards. Supported meaning has some support with their weapon. They could also shoot freehand while running, shoot while laying down on their side, shoot at targets held next to another rifleman's side, and they would have when they came to towns, they would have their. Can you imagine this? They have a long rifle, and
Could you move aside so we can see the slide?
Sorry. Okay, let's see. I'll stand here. Okay. Well, anyway, can you imagine this? You go in town and you're doing a shooting demonstration, and you ask one of your militiamen, "Okay, put that target right in between your legs, and I'm going to run freehand, and I will shoot the target." Well, guess what? All the way up on that march, they did that, and there was not one accident that's recorded anyway. And all the militiamen made uninjured up there, so I guess they knew what they were doing. Let's see here. Yeah. And they would put it on top of their head and run with their rifles and shoot targets. And when the townsfolk would see that, like if the rifle company was through here, you all gather out there and watch a shooting demonstration. And it was 1775. Say, I think we're going to win this war with folks like this.
Was there, inside the barrel, was there rifling?
Yeah, rifling. Yes, that's what made it different from the muzzle loaders, which were smooth barrel. And the smooth barrels could shoot accurately up to about, from my understanding, about 80 yards, somewhat accurately. If you knew what you're doing with the long rifle, now I think it's a stretch of imagination, but I talked to folks, and they said it's accurate. They said if you knew what you're doing with long rifle, you can shoot it accurately 300 yards. And these folks were sharpshooters. Okay, so here's what they called lobster backs, the British soldier, target of the riflemen. The British feared the riflemen even though they had 10 times more the ammo and are supposedly the most powerful army in the world. In Boston, they did not attack Washington's army all summer. While Washington's army was the weakest, if they would have went in and tried to attack Washington's army in July, they probably could have taken Washington and the whole Continental force, but they were afraid to go out there because Daniel Morgan got there early, and they complained about how these riflemen handle themselves in a military situation. They didn't shoot at soldiers, they aimed their rifles at the officer. In other words, if the officer showed himself, that's where they're going to point the gun. And the British officers didn't like that. And so they stayed inside Boston and hung out at the bars. That's basically what they did. So here's Boston. This is what Boston was like in 1775. It doesn't look anything like that now. See all these hills? Most of them are no longer hills because they use this fill to fill all this in. Fenway Park's right about here, if you filled it in. But as Michael Cresap knew Boston, there was just a neck here. And he and Daniel Morgan were charged by George Washington when he got there on August 25th. They were to protect the neck. They were not to allow any soldiers from Boston, the British soldier, to cross this neck. And so they stayed in this area here, Daniel Morgan and Michael Cresap's company. George Washington's headquarters were in Cambridge. There was a 13-mile line of soldiers here, Continental forces here, but there was like 18,000 Continental soldiers here all along this line. But I just want to let you know this is where Daniel Morgan was, and they were charged by Washington. Do not let the British soldiers come here because I am going to make my first move. Washington didn't do anything either until August 26th. All 10 rifle companies, because
Michael Cresap was the last rifle company to arrive, and when he had all 10 companies, that's when George Washington made his move. He did not make his move, and the Continental Congress was complaining, why don't you do something, go into Boston? But all the riflemen there were not there. But when Michael Cresap's company shows up, the very next day he takes action. He's going to take Plowed Hill, which overlooks Bunkers Hill, and then he's trying to entice the British to come out and defend themselves on boats across the creek, across the bay here, and down this neck and try to come around. He wanted them to so he could confront them, because Washington wanted to end the war in 1775. So the British did try to come across, and but there was a problem. This is considered it's called the Independence Day Hurricane of 1775, the eighth worst hurricane in American history. On the night of August 26, when Cresap goes into action, a rifleman records in his diary that the guns of Cresap's rifles flashed brighter and louder than the lightning and thunder of the incoming tropical storm. There was thunder and lightning. It's like a Hollywood movie, folks, but this is true. This actually happened. What happened was, as I said, Morgan and Cresap come up here. As the British are trying to come out here, they see that Washington's taking Plowed Hill, and they get an orders to come across here, but the riflemen stop them right here, and they can't cross. They're blocked by the riflemen, and they run back into town, and so they don't help out. Do not take Plowed Hill. So this is the. So what is this? This is very significant in history, but you don't hear much about it. Independence Day, the hurricane comes in, but it doesn't hit shore, it comes offshore. It destroys all the major boats along the shore, all the way from the Carolinas up New England. And the churches and the Continental forces all thought, like, this has got to be divine providence, because the British can't move, they can't get reinforcements or anything, because this hurricane's offshore, just blowing around. And so on August 26th, when all this lightning and thunder, and that's the night that Cresap's rifles made their move in Boston. So, divine providence. Psalms 48:7 says, "Thou breakest the ships of Taurus with an east wind." And that's, in biblical times, a hurricane was used to cause havoc for a critical biblical moment in history. And the colonists thought, wow, this is amazing. And as you know, if you follow Washington throughout the American Revolution, weather often helps George Washington get out fixes. And check it out. Anyway, so divine providence, colonists thought these storms were brought on by divine providence to help the colonies. British could not bring in new reinforcements or supplies. In fact, it took them years to restore the harbors. But that's why they don't attack until the very next year in New York. They eventually abandoned Boston, go to New York, and that's where they create some havoc there. But there are many marvelous stories how inclement weather worked to benefit Washington throughout the war. In a sermon in May 1783 by Ezra Stiles, referring to the Bible verse, "Even the winds of the sea obey him," he said in the pulpit, "Who but the ruler of the winds could have delayed British reinforcements by 3 months of contrary ocean winds at a critical point of the war?" So what is the significance of Plowed Hill? Washington made first large-scale military move as commander on Plowed Hill. First casualties under Washington's command during the American Revolutionary War occurred on Plowed Hill. Washington attempts to end the American Revolution and go home before winter on Plowed Hill. Doesn't work. Stalemate instead. The war continues for several more years. And here it is. Michael is so sick that he requests, he might have got, I don't know this for a fact, but he is one of the first to get military sick leave. He asked George, said, I got to get back home and I'm feeling pretty bad. And so he, in September, late September, he tries, Washington grants, come on, go home. He was having a son was being born also. He wanted to be home for that. But Washington ordered him, once you feel better, come back. But he doesn't make it all the way down. He makes it to New York. And there, by this time, believe it or not, Michael Cresap is one of the most famous people in the colonies. You wouldn't know it now, but he was one of 3 individuals, one of the most famous individuals. When he said Michael Cresap, everybody knew what you're talking about. It was the largest funeral in the history of New York when he died in 1775. He's buried at Trinity Church in New York. What illness do you think killed Michael Cresap? What do you think Michael Cresap had? Secondary illness, malaria. Basically, malaria, he got that in 1764 because he was fighting along the Ohio River, the Indians during Dunmore's War, the swampy areas, and that's where you think they picked it up. He was sick right after that, or never did get well, 100%. Malaria's like, if you have malaria, do you know anybody who has malaria?
I've had it.
Huh?
I've had it.
Okay. Sometimes you feel good and sometimes you feel bad, right?
It can recur.
That's right, it's reoccurring. You have moments where, man, I'm feeling really bad. And then next day you're feeling, hey, I must be well. The next day you're sick again. It's just cyclic. And you never get 100% well.
Cyclic.
Unless you take the right, medicines at the time. And Cresap wasn't available to him. So you got to remember, George Washington just forming his army. 18,000 people from all over the colonies are up in Boston, from many colonies. I think there's only one colony that was not there. And guess what? He had not had time to set up sanitary, standards. So people went to the bathroom, unfortunately, wherever they were. And so it got into water, and people were drinking that water. So it was a terrible situation. More people died from this type of illness than by bullets or anything. More people were killed this way and died this way. And then secondary illnesses were dysentery, consumption, dropsy, congestive heart failure. So some of you are right on. Just those are your resistance is down. You start picking up this other stuff. You're not eating right. You're not drinking right fluids, and they're dirty. And so, but when at Tombstone, I like, this is the original tombstone. Right now, that's in New York City, the original tombstone. There's a replica tombstone at his actual gravesite. This is the original tombstone at the Revolutionary War Museum in Philadelphia. And if you note, and this tombstone was made in 1775 in memory of Michael Cresap, 1st Company of Riflemen, and son to Colonel Thomas Cresap, who departed this life October 18, 1775. Okay, that's all I have, Mr. Steve.
Thank you.
That's all I have.